The war had finally ended, but the stars still looked wounded. Whole worlds had burned, ships had fallen, and millions were gone. The silence that followed was not peace. It was the echo of everything lost. Ethan Cole, a human engineer from Earth, floated alone inside the wrecked remains of Orbital Station Theta 9. The metal walls around him groaned and creaked with every shift of the broken structure. Half the lights were dead, and the other half flickered weakly like dying candles. He could still smell smoke and burned circuitry. It felt like the station itself was breathing its last. Ethan was tired, physically, mentally, soul-deep tired. He had stayed behind to repair the escape pods for others when the battle ended. The last shuttle had already left 3 hours ago. He told himself he would leave after fixing the communications array, but deep down he knew why he hadn't gone. He couldn't abandon what was left, not while someone might still be alive inside this ruin. The Thalren, the alien allies turned enemies, had also suffered terribly. Their ships had been majestic once, glowing like flowing silver rivers in the night sky. Now they were shattered across the void. Ethan had seen enough of them to think none could have survived. He was wrong. As he moved through a corridor filled with floating debris, his suit's motion sensor flickered. Someone was moving. At first he thought it was another human survivor. But the moment his light touched her, he froze. It was a woman, tall, elegant, and unlike any human he had ever seen. Her skin shimmered faintly, almost metallic, with a silver-blue glow. Her armor was broken, one arm burned, and her breathing ragged. Her long hair floated around her like liquid starlight. Even wounded and weak, she carried a quiet strength, like someone who had survived the impossible. Ethan's instinct took over. Hey, don't move. I'm here to help," he said, pushing off a wall and gliding toward her. Her eyes snapped open. They were bright violet, glowing faintly in the dim corridor. For a moment, confusion filled them, then recognition. "You human?" she whispered in broken English, her voice soft but steady. Ethan nodded quickly. "Yeah, human. You're safe now, okay? What's your name?" She hesitated before answering. "Lyra, of the Thalren." Ethan blinked. "You're Thalren?" He had seen her kind only in battle, from a distance through glass and gunfire. Now one of them was right in front of him, hurt, vulnerable, and afraid. She tried to move but winced in pain. Her shoulder armor cracked further, revealing blackened skin beneath. Ethan reached forward, carefully supporting her weight. Easy. You're injured. Let's get you somewhere stable." Her gaze followed his every motion, uncertain, cautious. "Why?" she asked weakly. "Your people. They hate us." Ethan looked her straight in the eyes. "Maybe, but I'm not people, I'm just me. And I don't leave anyone behind." Something in his tone made her pause. The distrust in her eyes softened slightly. She gave a faint nod. "Then, I will not stop you." He guided her through the corridor toward the medbay. Every few steps the lights flickered, throwing their shadows across the walls. One human and one alien. Both survivors of a war neither had wanted. Inside the medbay, Ethan helped her onto a chair, then began searching for supplies. The hum of the broken station filled the silence between them. As he cleaned her burns and wrapped her arm, Lyra studied him carefully. His hands were steady, gentle. Nothing like the cold cruelty she had been taught to expect from humans. "You fight, yet you heal," she murmured softly. "Strange kind." Ethan smiled faintly. "We try. Sometimes we do both in the same day." For the first time she almost smiled too, a small, uncertain curve of her lips. When he was done, he handed her a canteen. "Drink. You'll need it." She took it, drinking slowly, her violet eyes never leaving his face. There was gratitude there, but also something deeper, something ancient and searching. After a long silence, she spoke again. "Why are you still here, human?" "Everyone else left," he shrugged. "Didn't feel right to go. There might be someone still alive. Guess I found you." Her fingers tightened slightly on the metal cup. Then, "Perhaps the stars wanted us to meet." Ethan didn't know what to say to that. He only knew that in the middle of all the death and ruin, her words made something stir inside him, something that had been silent for a long time. As the hours passed, the storm outside the station began to rage again. Lightning cracked across the surface of the nearby planet, and the old metal walls groaned louder. But in the medbay, under the flicker of broken lights, two souls from different worlds sat together in fragile peace. For the first time since the war began, Ethan didn't feel alone, and Lyra, the alien warrior who once fought against humans, closed her eyes, not in pain but in something like quiet trust. In that single moment, a new bond was born, one neither of them could explain but both could feel. A bond that would change the stars forever. The storm outside never stopped. For 3 endless days, the orbital station drifted through the dark, wrapped in static and lightning. Communication was down, the engines were dead, and the silence between explosions of thunder felt heavier than air. Ethan and Lyra stayed inside the medbay, surrounded by flickering screens and half-broken lights. He had patched the air system and fixed enough power to keep the temperature stable. Still, it was cold. Cold enough that both of them could see their breath in the dim light. Ethan worked quietly, repairing small systems piece by piece. Lyra sat nearby, her wounded arm still bandaged, watching him with eyes that glowed faintly in the dark. He could feel her gaze on him often, curious, thoughtful, cautious. At first, he didn't speak much. He wasn't sure what to say to someone who had once been called an enemy. But silence, like space, had a way of pulling words out of lonely people. "Do you miss your home?" Ethan asked finally, his voice soft, almost uncertain. Lyra looked up slowly. "My home is far," she said. "A world of silver seas and crystal forests. The Thalren were born under light that never fades." Her voice trembled slightly. "I do not know if it still stands." Ethan paused, lowering his tools. "You lost people too, didn't you?" She gave a slow nod. "My sister, my captain, my bond group, all gone." Then she looked away, the muscles in her jaw tightening. "War does not choose who to take, it just takes." He didn't answer right away. He knew that kind of pain too well, the hollow ache of names that would never answer again. He wanted to say something comforting, but all he managed was, "I'm sorry." Lyra turned back to him, eyes softening a little. "You speak that word often, sorry. Your kind feels much." Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "Yeah, maybe too much sometimes." Silence fell again, but it was gentler this time, like the quiet between two people who had stopped being strangers. Later that night, as the storm roared outside, they shared a small meal of ration packs. Lyra's movements were slow, graceful even in exhaustion. She tasted the human food with clear confusion. "Your nourishment tastes empty," Ethan chuckled. "Yeah, it's not great, but it keeps us alive." She tilted her head slightly. "Alive," she repeated softly, like she was testing the word. "In my language, that means still burning inside." He looked at her, surprised. "That's actually beautiful." Lyra's lips curved faintly. "We speak with our hearts first, our mouths second." For the first time since meeting her, Ethan laughed quietly. It felt strange, hearing his own laughter again. It almost startled him. Lyra studied his expression. "Your laugh," she said slowly. "It sounds like wind through glass. I have never heard it before." "That's poetic," he said with a grin. "I do not know what that means," she admitted, tilting her head. "It means, you talk in a way that makes everything sound like a story." She blinked, then smiled very slightly. "Perhaps this is a story." Hours passed. The lights dimmed to night mode, casting a soft blue glow through the room. Ethan leaned back in his chair, exhausted. Lyra stood near the viewport, gazing out at the stars that flickered through the storm clouds of debris. After a while, she spoke again, quietly, like sharing a secret. "Among my people there is something we call the bond. It is sacred. Once made, it cannot be broken." Ethan looked up, curious. "A bond, like a promise?" She nodded slowly. "Deeper. We are not like you humans. We do not love many. We choose only one mate in our lifetime, one heart, one soul, forever." She turned toward him, her silver eyes bright. "Even death cannot end it." Ethan's breath caught. "That sounds intense." "It is truth," she said softly. "When we choose, it is not of the body. It is of the soul. The bond lets us feel the heartbeat of the one we love, even across stars." He was silent for a long moment. There was something beautiful and terrifying about what she said. "Humans," he said quietly, "we're not that way. We love, we lose, we try again. Sometimes it breaks us. Sometimes we heal." Lyra stepped closer, her expression calm, curious. "Then you are strong. To heal again and again, that is power." Her words hung in the air like warm light. For the first time, Ethan saw not an alien soldier, but a soul carrying the same kind of scars he did. The hum of the damaged systems filled the room. Outside, thunder rolled through the void. Inside, two hearts, human and alien, beat quietly, almost in rhythm. Lyra looked at him one last time before turning back to the stars. "Perhaps," she whispered, "the stars brought me to learn how humans love." Ethan smiled faintly, his eyes closing as sleep finally claimed him. "Maybe," he murmured, "the stars wanted me to remember how." The storm outside had quieted, leaving behind a silence that almost felt alive. The station floated gently like a wounded creature drifting in a dark sea. Inside the med bay, soft blue light from the monitors bathed the walls in a calm, eerie glow. Ethan sat at his workbench, repairing a small panel while Lyra stood near the viewport, staring at the endless stars. Her silver skin caught the light shining faintly, and for a moment she looked like she belonged to the heavens themselves. They had been stranded together for almost a week now. In that time, the walls between them had begun to fall, slowly, carefully. Ethan had learned that beneath Lyra's warrior calm was a deep sadness she rarely spoke about. And Lyra had learned that humans were not as weak as her people once believed. He was fragile, yes, but he never gave up, even when everything seemed lost. That morning, Ethan finished another system repair. "We're almost ready," he said. "Once the storm clears, we can send a signal and get you home." Lyra turned her gaze from the stars to him. Her expression was unreadable. "Home?" she repeated softly. "If it still welcomes me." He looked up at her. "Of course it will. You fought for them." She shook her head slowly. "I failed them, and now, I'm not sure where I belong." Ethan frowned, standing up. "You belong anywhere you're alive. That's what matters." For a long moment she didn't answer. Then she walked toward him, each step slow, deliberate. When she stopped in front of him, Ethan felt a strange energy in the air, like the space between them was charged. She spoke quietly, but every word carried weight. "Ethan of Earth," she said, "do you know why my people fear the bond?" He blinked, surprised by the sudden question. "You mean the mate bond you told me about?" She nodded. "Yes, the bond is eternal. It is not chosen with reason or logic or time. It happens once, and when it happens, it is forever." Ethan hesitated. "That sounds intense. How do you know when it happens?" Lyra's violet eyes met his. "You feel it. It begins with a heartbeat that is not your own." Her voice softened. "You feel their pain, their joy, their fear. It becomes your own." He stared at her, feeling something twist inside his chest. "That sounds beautiful, but also terrifying." Her lips curved into a faint, sad smile. "It is both." Silence settled between them. The hum of the station seemed louder now, the rhythm of machinery echoing their breaths. Then Lyra stepped closer, so close he could see faint silver veins beneath her skin, glowing softly with her pulse. "Ethan," she whispered, "I felt your heartbeat the day you found me. When you took my hand in the fire," it began. His eyes widened. "What are you saying?" Her next words were quiet, almost trembling, but certain. "I have chosen. My bond is formed. We choose only one mate forever." She paused, her voice breaking slightly. "And you're mine." The words hit him like thunder. He froze, unable to speak, unable to move. His heart pounded in his chest so hard it hurt. "Lyra," he whispered, shaking his head. "No, that can't, we barely know each other." She didn't look hurt. Only calm, steady. "Time does not decide the bond. The soul does." He stepped back slightly, trying to breathe. "I'm human. We're different. You can't just bind yourself to me." Lyra's eyes softened. "It is not something I can undo. I felt your spirit before my body healed. It was like warmth after 1,000 winters." He stared at her helplessly. "You don't even know what I'm like. I could be, I don't know, wrong for you." "Then I will learn your wrongs," she said simply. "I will learn you." Her honesty was too much. Ethan turned away, running a hand through his hair. He wanted to argue, to tell her she was mistaken, that it was impossible. But deep down he couldn't deny it. He had felt something when he first touched her. A pulse that wasn't his, a silence that suddenly wasn't empty anymore. He took a deep breath. "Lyra, if this bond means what you say, then what happens if one of us—" He couldn't finish the sentence. Her gaze fell, and for the first time she looked fragile. "Then the other carries the silence. For the rest of their life." The weight of her words hung heavy between them. He didn't know what scared him more, that she might lose him, or that he might lose her. Lyra turned to the viewport again, her reflection faint in the glass. "Do not be afraid, Ethan of Earth," she said softly. "I did not choose this to trap you. I chose it because it is truth." Ethan stood there, his heart a storm of confusion and awe. In the quiet hum of that broken station, an alien girl had given him something no human could truly understand. Her forever. He didn't know if he could accept it. But he knew one thing for certain: nothing between them would ever be simple again. Ethan could not sleep that night. He lay on the cold metal floor beside the medbay heater, eyes open, staring at the ceiling lights that flickered like dying stars. Lyra's words echoed inside his head, over and over like a heartbeat he couldn't escape. "We choose only one mate forever, and you're mine." He turned to look at her. Lyra was resting near the viewport, her silver skin glowing faintly in the darkness. Her breathing was soft and even. She looked peaceful, almost fragile, and that scared him even more. She had given him something eternal, something she could never take back, but he was just human, temporary, weak. Humans weren't made for forever. They loved, they lost, they broke, and they moved on. But Lyra's kind didn't. Once they bonded, they carried it for life and beyond it. He sat up slowly, rubbing his hands over his face. "What if I hurt her?" he whispered to himself. "What if I can't be what she thinks I am?" He tried to tell himself it wasn't real, that it was just alien instinct or maybe a side effect of her injuries. But deep down he knew it was real. He had seen it in her eyes. That strange glowing warmth whenever she looked at him like she was seeing something sacred. By morning, exhaustion had replaced fear, but the weight in his chest remained. When he saw Lyra awake, she greeted him with a soft smile. "Did you rest?" she asked gently. "Not really," he admitted. "Too much on my mind." She tilted her head slightly, her expression calm but curious. "You are afraid," he hesitated. "A little, yeah. Of me?" she asked, voice low. He looked at her, those silver eyes, that quiet strength. "No, not of you." "Of what this means," Lyra didn't reply. She stood silently, watching him. Her expression didn't change, but something behind her eyes dimmed a little, like a light fading under shadow. Ethan sighed, trying to explain. "Lyra, humans, we don't have forever. We don't know what it means to love only once. We fall, we fail, we try again. That's how we survive." She nodded slowly. "Then you are brave. To love even knowing it can end." He frowned. "It's not bravery. It's just human nature." She looked away, her gaze lost in the window beyond. "And yet you fear to let me love you." That silence cut deeper than any argument could. Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "I don't want to be the reason you suffer one day. What if something happens to me? What if I—" Lyra turned sharply. "Then I will grieve. I will carry the silence as my kind always have. But I will not regret it." Her voice was steady, but her eyes shone with quiet pain. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You don't understand what you're giving up. You could go home, find someone like you, someone who understands your ways." Lyra met his gaze, unflinching. "You think I have not tried to understand my own heart? I have fought battles that broke mountains, Ethan of Earth, but nothing has ever felt as strong as this." He stared at her, words dying in his throat. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Only the low hum of the station filled the space between them. Finally, Ethan turned away. "I just need some air," he muttered. He walked down the narrow hallway, his footsteps echoing softly. But even far from her, he could feel her presence, like a quiet pulse in the back of his mind. Her heartbeat, her bond. He pressed his hands against the wall, breathing hard. "This isn't fair," he whispered. "I didn't ask for this." But when he closed his eyes, he saw her face, the way she'd looked at him when he saved her, the way her voice trembled when she confessed. And suddenly he didn't know if he was more afraid of losing her, or of letting her love him completely. Back in the medbay, Lyra sat silently near the viewport, watching the empty stars. Her hand rested over her heart, feeling the quiet rhythm that now matched his. She whispered softly to herself in her own language, words that no human would ever understand, words that meant, "I would rather suffer with truth than live without it." Hours later, when Ethan returned, she didn't look up. He hesitated before speaking. "Lyra, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" she interrupted gently, still gazing at the stars. Do not apologize for fear, Ethan. It is the shadow of care. It means your heart is still alive. He swallowed hard, unsure how to respond. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful this time. It was heavy, fragile, full of things neither of them could say. Outside, the storm had passed, but inside both hearts were still fighting their own. And as the faint light of a distant sun touched the station's hull, Ethan realized something he couldn't deny anymore. He was already bound in ways he didn't yet understand. The rescue signal came at dawn, a faint crackle on the radio followed by a distant voice calling through the static. Station Theta 9, this is Command Fleet 7. We received your distress signal. Hold position. We're coming. Ethan froze, staring at the flickering console. For a second, he couldn't believe it was real. After all the silence, the loneliness, the fear, someone had finally heard them. He turned to Lyra, who stood by the viewport watching the faint glow of approaching ships in the distance. Her eyes reflected both wonder and sadness. Your people, she said softly. Our people. Ethan corrected gently, though his voice trembled. The truth hit him harder than he expected. Their time, this strange, impossible time together, was ending. Lyra didn't speak for a while. She only watched as the light of the incoming fleet grew brighter. When she finally turned to him, there was something unspoken in her expression, something almost like pain. So this is goodbye, she said. Ethan forced a small smile. Maybe not goodbye, maybe. See you later. Her eyes lowered. My people do not have that word. When we part forever. He stepped closer. Then I guess I'll have to teach you our way. For the first time that morning, she smiled faintly, a fragile, beautiful thing. You humans, she murmured, always trying to change the stars. As the ships approached, the station trembled from their landing thrusters. The comm crackled again. Rescue team inbound. Prepare for evac. Ethan helped Lyra gather her things, a small pack of recovered data, a fragment of her armor, and nothing more. She traveled light as warriors did, but when she looked around the medbay one last time, her hand brushed the seat where she had rested, the tools he had used to heal her, and the faint mark on the floor where they had shared their first meal. She touched it gently. I will remember this place, he swallowed hard. It's just metal and dust, she shook her head. No, it is where I found life again. The hatch opened with a hiss and a human rescue team stepped inside, 3 figures in white suits. Ethan Cole? The leader called. You're alive, thank God. We thought. The man stopped mid-sentence when he saw Lyra. His hand went immediately to his sidearm. What is that doing here? Ethan stepped in front of her without thinking. She's not a threat. She's a survivor, same as me. The soldiers exchanged looks. One of them muttered, Command didn't say anything about bringing aliens aboard. She saved my life, Ethan said firmly. She's coming with us. Lyra touched his shoulder gently. Do not fight for me, she whispered. It is enough that you stood beside me. He turned to her, voice breaking. I can't just leave you here. Her silver eyes softened. You can. You must, the soldiers spoke again. Sir Thalren ships are arriving too. They'll retrieve their own. You both go to your people. The words were like knives. Your people, as if the bond between them meant nothing. Lyra took a small step back, her gaze locked on Ethan's. Will you look for me again? He wanted to promise. He wanted to say yes. But the truth was they came from different worlds, different skies, different laws. So he said the only thing that wouldn't break her heart. I'll try, she smiled sadly. Then I will wait, even if it takes 100 human lifetimes. The soldiers led him toward the airlock. He turned one last time. Lyra stood by the viewport again, her hand pressed against the glass. He pressed his hand to the other side, their fingers almost touching through the barrier of air and metal. The engines roared. The ship began to pull away. Lyra's figure grew smaller, her silver glow fading into the storm of stars. Ethan sat silently as the shuttle left the wreck behind. The soldier beside him spoke quietly. You're lucky to be alive, sir. Ethan gave no answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the dark space outside, where one tiny light still shimmered faintly in the distance, the reflection of her ship. He didn't know why, but a strange ache filled his chest. And just before the stars swallowed the last trace of her, he felt something deep inside him, a heartbeat that wasn't his own. Lyra's voice, faint and distant, whispered across the void. "Do not forget me, Ethan of Earth." He closed his eyes. "Never," he whispered back. The stars listened, and somewhere out there, across 1,000 miles of darkness, two hearts continued to beat as one, divided by duty, bound by something stronger. Years passed. The war between humans and the Thalren finally ended, though peace was fragile, like thin glass ready to crack. The galaxy had grown tired of fighting. Too many lives were lost. Too many stars had gone dark. Ethan Cole had become something of a quiet legend. The man who survived the crash of Theta 9, the human who had once saved and defended an alien. But he never told anyone the full story. Not about Lyra. Not about the nights they shared under the broken station lights. He kept that memory locked deep inside where no one could take it away. He had returned to Earth, but nothing felt the same. The blue sky seemed smaller, the crowds too loud, the laughter too shallow. He went back to his duties, trained new recruits, and pretended that everything was fine. But at night, when he looked at the stars, he always searched for one, the faint silver one that had shone beside Theta 9, the one he had seen last before she disappeared. Sometimes he dreamed of her voice. Sometimes he woke up whispering her name. One morning, everything changed. He received an urgent message from Command. "Ambassador Cole, you are requested to attend the first Human Thalren Peace Summit. Location Nova Station Prime." At first, he refused. He had no interest in politics or ceremonies. But then at the bottom of the message, he saw something that made his heart stop. "The Thalren delegation will be led by Commander Lyra Ethvarel." He read the name again. And again. It couldn't be, but deep down he knew it was her. When he arrived at Nova Station, he almost couldn't breathe. The halls were bright and filled with banners, half blue, half silver. Humans and aliens walking side by side, still cautious, still distant. Ethan stood among the human delegation, his uniform polished but his hands trembling slightly. He kept his face calm, but his heart raced with every step. Then across the wide chamber he saw her. Lyra stood with her people, tall and radiant in a ceremonial armor of white and silver. Time hadn't changed her. It had only made her presence stronger. Her silver eyes scanned the hall, and then stopped. Their gazes met. For a second, neither of them moved. The world seemed to vanish around them. No diplomats, no soldiers, no war. Only the quiet, unspoken connection between two souls who had waited far too long. Lyra's lips parted slightly, but she didn't speak. Protocol kept her still. Ethan wanted to run to her, to break the rules, to hold her again, but he didn't. He simply nodded once, a quiet promise in his eyes. Later, during the summit, they were finally left alone in a small observation chamber overlooking the stars. The air was heavy with silence until she finally spoke. "You kept your promise," she said softly. "You found me again." Ethan's throat tightened. "I told you I'd try." Lyra smiled faintly, the same small, gentle smile he had seen years ago. "Your people call this peace. My people call it healing." He looked at her closely. She seemed the same, yet different, calmer, wiser. "You're a commander now. I had to become strong," she said, "to stand for something greater than revenge." Then she looked at him and her voice softened. "You taught me that." He didn't know what to say. The stars outside shimmered, casting silver light across her face. Finally, he whispered, "I missed you, Lyra." She closed her eyes for a moment. "In my world," she said, "we do not have a word for miss, but every night when I looked at the stars, I felt incomplete." Ethan smiled sadly. "That's what missing someone means." Lyra took a small step closer. "We choose only one mate in our lifetime, Ethan of Earth. I told you that once. I have not chosen another," his breath caught, "even after all these years." Her silver eyes shimmered. Time does not weaken what is true. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The hum of the station faded into the background. Then Ethan took her hand, slowly, carefully, as if afraid the moment would disappear. Her fingers were cool, but her pulse was warm, alive. He said quietly, "Then maybe peace was never about treaties. Maybe it was about this." Lyra smiled. Perhaps the stars wanted it so. As the summit concluded, the galaxy celebrated a fragile new beginning. But in one quiet corner of Nova Station, two hearts, human and alien, had already made peace long before any treaty was signed. They stood together at the viewport, side by side, watching the same sky. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel lost, and as Lyra leaned slightly against him, whispering, "You found me again?" he realized something simple and beautiful. He hadn't just found her. He had found home. The peace summit was almost over. After years of blood, fear, and silence, humans and Thalren finally stood together under one roof. Smiles were still cautious, words still formal, but it was a beginning. Ethan and Lyra had spent every possible moment together during the summit. Away from the cameras, away from the guards, they spoke softly in the quiet corridors of Nova Station. They talked about the years they had lost, the people they had saved, and the stars they still wished to see together. For the first time since Theta 9, Ethan felt alive again. When Lyra smiled, it was like the whole galaxy brightened, but peace, as always, was fragile. On the last day of the summit, just before the final signing ceremony, alarms began to scream. Red lights flashed across the corridors. Ethan looked up as the station trembled under a deep rumble. "Evac alert!" shouted a soldier. "Unknown ship approaching." Shields compromised. Within seconds, chaos filled the hall. Diplomats ran for cover. Security units shouted orders. Ethan turned toward Lyra, who was already pulling him toward the side corridor. "Stay behind me," she said, her voice steady but urgent. He shook his head. "I'm not losing you again." A massive explosion rocked the chamber. The force threw them both against the wall. Smoke and sparks filled the air. Through the haze, Ethan could see alien fighters outside. Not Thalren, not human. A third faction. Mercenaries who didn't want peace. The attack was quick, brutal. Blasts shook the outer hull and a warning echoed through the speakers. "Hull breach in Sector 7. Gravity failing." Lyra's training took over. She led Ethan through the damaged corridor, pushing through fire and falling metal. Her armor shimmered, catching stray sparks, her movements graceful and sharp, like the warrior she once was. Ethan tried to keep up, coughing through the smoke. "You're bleeding," he said, pointing to a burn on her shoulder. She ignored it. "We must reach the control core. If they destroy it, this station will fall into the planet's orbit." They fought their way through the chaos. Soldiers, medics, panicked diplomats, until they reached the central chamber. But the doors were sealed. The controls flickered, half destroyed. Ethan slammed his fist against the panel. "We're locked out." Lyra knelt beside it, pressing her palm against the metal. "No, there is another way." She looked up at him, and something in her eyes made his chest tighten. "The manual override is inside the reactor. But once I start it, I can't leave." Ethan froze. No, we'll find another way." "There is no other way," she said softly. "If I do not stabilize it, thousands will die." He grabbed her shoulders, shaking his head. "I'm not letting you sacrifice yourself again. Not after everything." Her hand came up, gently touching his cheek. "Do you remember what I told you? We choose only one mate for life." His eyes filled with tears. "Don't say that. Please, Lyra." "I chose you," she whispered. "And if my last act can protect your world, then I have no fear." Before he could stop her, she turned and forced open the reactor hatch. Blinding white light spilled out, wind roaring from the energy vent. Ethan shouted her name, but she was already inside. The sound of the reactor grew louder. The metal walls glowed red. Ethan watched through the glass window as Lyra reached the control core, her silhouette outlined by light. She pressed her hand against the unstable reactor crystal, her body glowing faintly silver. Then her voice came through the comm, soft, steady, breaking his heart all over again. "Ethan of Earth, thank you for showing me your world." He pressed his hand to the glass. "Lyra, please come back. You promised you'd wait for me." Her voice trembled. "And I will." Somewhere beyond the stars, the light burst. A surge of energy rushed through the station, stabilizing the core, sealing the breaches. The alarm stopped. The tremors faded. When the light cleared, she was gone. Only silence remained. Ethan fell to his knees, shaking, unable to speak. Around him, people cheered. The station was saved, lives were spared. But all he could see was the empty chamber beyond the glass. Later, when the summit resumed, the treaty was signed in her name. Commander Lyra Eth Varel, the Guardian of Peace. Ethan stood at the viewport, staring at the stars again. He whispered softly, "You kept your promise, Lyra. You waited. And I'll keep mine. I'll find you. Outside, a single silver streak crossed the darkness, a comet glowing like a heartbeat in the night sky. And as he watched it fade, he smiled through his tears, knowing deep in his soul that love, once born, never truly ends, not even among the stars.